Welcome to the third week in our abundance program. We are using the book, The 5 Gifts of Abundance, Creating a Consciousness of Wealth by, now I'm blank all of a sudden, Diane Harmony. And so today we are looking at chapters 5 and 6, which is about forgiving ourselves and others, like Ray had said to you. And so I want to begin with the premise, the foundation, first of all, to even have this talk, is that we live in a universe of infinite good. That invisible presence, that life, the universe itself is that energy of infinite good. That infinite good is the nature of that thing we call God, of life, of spirit, of that which is beyond name or identity or title. And so today, I'm just going to call it good. So when I say good, I'm referring to that one divine presence. And so good, then, expresses itself as everything. And it expresses itself as everything that we call desirable. Anything that we name good in our lives is that one presence of good expressing itself. And so that means that it expresses itself in our lives as love and peace and joy and plenty and harmony in our relationships and order in our bodies. Anything that gives you that experience of good in your life is that one. And so what that means then is all the good that we experience is the divine unfolding itself as that good. That we live in that energetic field of the good. And that it is expressing itself everywhere, all of the time. And so when it says in the Bible then that it is God's good pleasure to give us the kingdom, the reason that it says that is because that is the nature of God. To unfold itself, its nature is that kingdom of good that we live in. And it could not withhold that good because that's its nature to unfold as that good. And so what that says to me then is if we are not experiencing abundance in our lives, if we are not experiencing an abundance of peace or love or harmony or money or plenty or good of any kind, it's not that the divine has withheld it. It's that somehow we are doing something to block that from coming into our lives because that is everywhere present. And so some of the ways that we block that good from coming into our lives are through having and holding resentment and negative judgments and condemnation and unforgiveness. Those things block that flow from coming into us. Ernest Holmes, who is the founder of this philosophy, says, God can do for us only what God can do through us. When we are holding negative judgment and condemnation and unforgiveness, our nature is then unlike the nature of life, of that good. And because our nature then is not of that same vibration, it cannot get in. And so Ernest Holmes says in the Science of Mind textbook, from selfish reasons alone, if no loftier reason, we cannot afford to find fault, to hate, or even to hold in mind anything against any living soul. The love of God cannot hear the prayer of the one who fails to love. The God of love cannot hear the prayer of the one who fails to love because we are being unlike God in our nature. And when we are unlike that, we aren't open to that coming into our lives. Do you get that? And so when I talk about forgiving, I'm not saying that we should forgive because it's the Christian thing to do, or that it's the right thing to do, or even that it will make you a better person, or that you will be a better person if you forgive. I am saying it's important to forgive because when we do not forgive, we obstruct the flow of good from flowing into our lives. We obstruct the flow of abundance, that abundance of plenty and the things that we desire coming into our lives. Because what happens when we're in non-forgiveness, it's like we harden our hearts. It's like we have this defensive posture against life. It's like we build up this wall around ourselves, this thick, stone, heavy, impermeable wall to protect ourselves from that person. But that big, thick wall also keeps anything else from coming in. It keeps love from coming in. It keeps peace from coming in. It keeps joy from coming in. And so that wall of protection blocks those other things from coming in. And so in class this week, we're doing a class along with this book, and we talked about forgiving other people and forgiving ourselves this week in class. And I heard people say things like, I don't want to forgive that person. They don't deserve to be forgiven. What she did was wrong. What he did was hurtful. What she said was mean. If I was going to forgive, that would mean I'd be letting them off the hook. Sometimes those people that they were holding that anger and resentment towards have been dead for a long time. And so is it doing anything to this person who's dead, or is it doing something to the person who's holding the non-forgiveness? It's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Our unforgiveness has nothing to do with them. They don't even maybe know that we're holding an unforgiveness. It's what's going on inside of us. And so I cannot be clear enough when I say forgiving is never for them. It is always for us. Our forgiveness is because of what happens inside of us when we forgive. And so in her book, Diane Harmony says, the reason to forgive is to claim your own freedom, not to let anyone off the hook. And A Course in Miracles says, all forgiveness is a gift to yourself. I remember some years ago reading that story about J.C. Dugard. She was the one that had been kidnapped when she was a little girl and held captive in that backyard for 18 years. And it was a very short time after she had been released, saved, whatever, and she was doing an interview, and she said in that interview that she had forgiven her captors, Philip and Nancy Garrido. She had forgiven them entirely because she was unwilling to allow them to hold her captive for one more moment in her life. Because her unforgiveness was holding her captive. And so the reason that we forgive is so we can disconnect emotionally, so that we can disconnect energetically from the person and from the situation. And so I think it's really important to know that forgiveness does not mean condoning a behavior. She wasn't saying what they did was okay. Forgiving is not saying that it's okay or that it's all right. And we don't forgive and forget. We remember, because if we didn't remember, we would very likely put ourselves back into the same situation or back in the way of the same person who caused that harm in the first place. So forgiving isn't about forgetting. And when I look up the definition of forgiveness, this is what it says. To stop feeling angry or resentful for an offense or a mistake. To cancel an indebtedness. To release from liability. So how about this? I release you from the liability of being responsible for my well-being. I release you, whoever did that thing, from the responsibility and the liability of being responsible for my peace. I release you from the liability for being responsible for my self-worth and my self-value and telling me who I am. I release you from being responsible for my experience of good in my life. When we forgive, what happens is we step back into our own power. We step into our power to create the life that we want to live from this moment forward, unplugging from the past and leaving that behind. Diane Harmony says, non-forgiveness keeps us stuck in the past, It keeps your energy attached to what didn't meet your expectations. That is key. I think that is huge. To recognize that our unforgiveness is because it didn't meet an expectation that we had. Every single time we hold unforgiveness or resentment, it's because somebody didn't meet an expectation that we had about them. Perhaps it was an expectation that they wouldn't betray you, or an expectation that they wouldn't hurt you, or an expectation that they would be kind to you, or nice to you, or treat you fairly, but it's always because it didn't meet that expectation. And if you drop that expectation here and now, not then, if you drop that expectation right here and right now, there's nothing left to forgive. There's nothing to forgive. So try it for a second. Can you think of someone in your life, some situation or circumstance that you are still holding a resentment against? Can you see how you have an expectation or had an expectation about them? What they should do, how they should behave? Can you try just for a moment dropping that expectation? Let it go. What happens inside of you? Takes all the energy out of it. It's like there's nothing left except just what is, this moment. Do you feel how that unplugged you from the thing dropping that expectation? When we are plugged in to the past like that, to something that happened, it drains our energy. That life force, prana, chi, ki, our joy, our happiness, our peace, it drains that when we're plugged in to some degree. So I read a story on the internet this week. It was on Facebook. She says, "My daughter has not seen her biological dad since she was 4. She's 11 now. When she was 2, he contacted me and asked if I would allow him to terminate his parental rights so he could stop paying child support. And I agreed. I wanted to spare her the heartache of a revolving door father, and the sacrifice of the financial support was well worth him never being able to disappoint her again. I never lied to her about where he went or who her dad was. I've always answered her questions in the most age-appropriate way possible. When she was 4, he contacted me and told me that he had been diagnosed with cancer and he would like to see her. I set aside a day and we went and met in the park. He asked for 2 hours. He stayed 20 minutes and we never heard from him again. And now my daughter's 11. Over the summer, we ran into someone that knows him, and they commented on how she looks just like his other children. They elaborated that he had settled down and has a family now. My stomach tied itself in knots, thinking of how hurtful that must be to my daughter. I cut the conversation short, and we got in the car to leave, and that's when I saw her smiling. She said, "Mom, he figured out how to be a dad. That is such a nice thing. I'm happy for his kids." And that's the day when an 11-year-old taught me all I need to know about forgiveness. She had no expectations. She wasn't holding on to any expectations from the past about how he should have been. There was no attachment, so there was nothing to forgive. That is not having attachments. And so the very last thing that we do in that forgiving somebody else is look for the gift in it. What was the gift that we received from that situation? Did you learn how to be a stronger person? Did you learn how not to be in the world? Did you learn how to love yourself? Did you learn about your own value that has nothing to do with anybody else? I'm sure whatever it was, there is always something to gain and something to learn from it. So to ask yourself that, what did I learn? What is the gift in this? That's the last thing that helps you step out of being a victim to that circumstance. And then the second part of the reading this week was about forgiving ourselves. Because when we hold ourselves in judgment, when we hold ourselves in condemnation, when we continue to punish ourselves for something that we did a long time ago, what happens is it keeps us feeling undeserving. It keeps us feeling unworthy of having good in our lives. And then when we're feeling unworthy of that good, the law says, yes, you are unworthy. We feel undeserving. The law says, yes, you are undeserving, and then the good doesn't come into our lives. That thought and belief that I don't deserve whatever it is keeps that good from flowing into our lives. When we think I'm not enough, there's something wrong with me, I don't deserve, all those self-punishing kind of things we say to ourselves. And so Diane Harmony has 4 steps to free yourself from condemnation. And I actually printed them out on the back of your affirmation sheet so you can take them with you so you don't have to remember them. Except they didn't get printed there. You don't have them to take home with you. So if you want to write them down, you can write them on that sheet right there. And that means, let's see. They go like this. The first one is to admit that you've made a mistake. To admit whatever it is that you've done, but without the judgment. Just to admit that you've done it. So say you scratched somebody's car. Just to admit to yourself, I scratched their car. And then to recognize and know whatever it is, that thing that you've been judging yourself for, you are not it. You are not the thing that you've done. It is simply something that you said or something that you did, but it's not who you are. You are an incarnation of that infinite presence. That's who you are, not this thing. So you separate who you are from the thing it is that you've done. And then you tell someone. You tell someone about the mistake that you made, about the thing that you did. You tell a practitioner or a minister or a counselor or a trusted friend, someone who's not going to make you wrong, but your sharing whatever it is that you did allows you to step out of the shame that we hold on to. When you bring that thing to the light of day, the shame around it disappears or dissipates. And the last thing that you do is you make amends. To make amends does not necessarily mean to say you're sorry. To make amends means to make it right, to set it right. And so let's say that the thing that you did was your spouse had made a lovely dinner and had a lovely table set and told you dinner was going to be at 7 and you didn't get home until 9. Making amends might look like taking her out for a really nice dinner on another night, or bringing her flowers, or giving her a card, or telling her how important she is to you, that you're sorry. But making amends is making it right. And so say that maybe the thing that you did was broke windows in your school when you were a bratty teenager. And you're still carrying that thing around, how awful that was for you to have done that. Making amends looks like owning it and maybe doing something like writing an anonymous check to that school district that would pay for windows. It doesn't necessarily mean going and telling them, 37 years ago I broke windows in this school. It's about making it right for you, what feels right inside of you, so you can be complete with it, so that you can be done with it. If you're rude to the cashier in the restaurant, maybe it means saying, I'm sorry, you don't deserve to be treated that way. I've done that more than once. It's about owning it and then making it right. And it's not about forgetting what we've done. You don't forget. Forgetting allows you to not make the same mistake again, but it means to quit punishing yourself for it. It means to quit giving yourself a hard time and kicking yourself for it. That's why you make it right. You own it and you make it right. And so if you want to increase the abundance in your life, the abundance of any of the good that you want to come into your life, look at where you are holding resentment. Look at where you are still holding anger or negative judgment or condemnation or unforgiveness. Look at that. And then forgive. Remember, forgive means to stop feeling angry and resentful about it. Forgiveness means releasing them from the liability of being responsible for your happiness today, for your well-being. Let go of your expectations of how you expected them to be or what you expected it to be. That's how we forgive. And if you're not willing to forgive, can you become willing to be willing to forgive? And if you're not willing to be willing to forgive, can you become willing to be willing to be willing to forgive? That willingness creates an opening. It creates a crack in that wall you have built around yourself. It creates a shift and a movement. Because you know what? Our egos aren't the one that forgives. Our egos have to say, I'm willing, and our spirit is the one that does the forgiving. Because our spirit only knows love. And so choose freedom. Forgive yourself. Make it right. Learn from your mistakes. Allow that learning to lift you into being your greatest self and into living your greatest life. And as a result, you will be open to that inflow of good that is always present, that always fills this thing we call life. And so blessings to you on this path of awakening, of living from your spirit and living from your heart and saying yes to life. And so blessings to all of you.